The stagecoach door swung open before it had fully stopped, and Josephine Dalton jumped down onto the dusty street of Kingman, Arizona, with nothing but a carpet bag and a heart full of fear she refused to show on her face. The August heat of 1883 hit her like a physical wall, the sun beating down mercilessly on the small desert town that seemed to consist of little more than a main street lined with wooden buildings that had already begun to fade under the relentless Arizona sun. She had traveled for 3 weeks to get here, running from a life in Philadelphia that had become unbearable after her father had died and left her at the mercy of his business partner, a man twice her age who believed the debt her father owed him could be paid with her hand in marriage. At 22 years old, Josephine had sold everything she owned, bought a ticket west, and chosen Kingman simply because it was far enough away that Gerald Pemberton would never think to look for her there. She had enough money for one night at whatever passed for a hotel in this town, and then she would need to find work immediately. The plan was simple: stay the night, assess her options in the morning, and if Kingman proved as inhospitable as it looked, move on to the next town. She had no intention of putting down roots anywhere a man like Pemberton might eventually track her down. The hotel was easy enough to find: a 2-story structure with peeling paint and a sign that read Kingman Hotel and Boarding House in letters that had once been gold but were now a dull yellow-brown. She pushed through the door into a lobby that was marginally cooler than the street outside, where an older woman with steel-gray hair looked up from behind a desk. "Need a room?" the woman asked, her eyes taking in Josephine's traveling dress, which was dusty from the road but still fine enough to mark her as someone with at least some breeding. "Just for one night," Josephine said, setting her bag down. "How much?" 50 cents. "That includes breakfast." The woman turned the register toward her. "Name?" Josephine hesitated for only a moment before writing Josephine Dalton in careful script. She had considered using a false name, but something in her rebelled against it. She would not let Gerald Pemberton make her ashamed of who she was. "You are a long way from anywhere," the woman observed, reading the name upside down. "Family in Kingman." "No, I am looking for work." Josephine met her eyes directly. "Do you know of anyone hiring?" The woman's expression softened slightly. "Might be. The restaurant down the street needs a waitress, and the general store mentioned needing help with inventory. You look like you can read and write proper, which puts you ahead of most folks around here." She handed Josephine a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs." "My name is Martha if you need anything." "Thank you." Josephine took the key and climbed the narrow staircase, finding her room to be small but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the main street. She set her bag down and moved to the window, looking out at the town she had committed to staying in for exactly one night. The street below was busy despite the heat. She watched cowboys ride past, their hats pulled low against the sun. A wagon loaded with supplies rolled by, raising a cloud of dust. Across the street, outside what appeared to be a saloon, several men stood talking, their voices carrying up to her window but not clearly enough for her to make out words. One of them caught her attention. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell almost to his collar. Even from this distance, there was something about the way he stood, relaxed but alert, that drew the eye. As she watched, he laughed at something one of the other men said, the sound carrying clearly, warm and genuine. He looked up suddenly, as if he had felt her gaze, and even though she was too far away to see his eyes clearly, she felt the impact of that look. She stepped back from the window quickly, her heart beating faster for reasons she did not want to examine. She needed to be practical. Romance, attraction, any of that was the furthest thing from what her life could accommodate right now. She needed work, stability, and the ability to disappear again if necessary. She certainly did not need to be noticing tall cowboys with warm laughs. After washing the dust from her face and hands and changing into a slightly fresher dress, Josephine went back downstairs. Martha was still at the desk and looked up with an approving nod. Restaurant is called Sadie's Place, 3 doors down on the left. Tell her Martha sent you. Sadie can be prickly, but she is fair. Josephine thanked her and stepped back out into the afternoon heat. The restaurant was easy to find, and inside, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes and flour on her apron listened to Josephine's request for work. "Can you cook?" Sadie asked. "Some. I am better at serving and managing. I can keep books if you need." Sadie's eyebrows rose. "Can you now? And what brings a girl who can keep books to Kingman looking for work in a restaurant?" Josephine had prepared for this question. "My father died. I needed a fresh start somewhere new." It was enough of the truth to ring honest. Sadie studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I can give you a trial starting tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. Pay is 75 cents a day plus meals. You do well, we will talk about more." Relief flooded through Josephine so strongly she almost swayed. "Thank you. I will be here." She left the restaurant feeling like she could breathe properly for the first time in weeks. One day of pay would not be enough to keep going, but it was a start. If she could prove herself quickly, she might be able to stay in Kingman for a few weeks, build up some savings, and then decide where to go next. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Without anywhere else to go, Josephine walked slowly down the main street, taking in the town that would be her home for at least one night. There was a general store, a blacksmith, a sheriff's office, 2 saloons, a church, and various other businesses. It was not so different from dozens of other small western towns she had passed through on her journey. "Careful there." A hand caught her elbow just as she was about to step off the boardwalk into the street, and she turned to find herself looking up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. It was the man from across the street, the one she had noticed from her window. Up close, he was even more striking, with a strong jaw, sun-weathered skin, and smile lines around his eyes that suggested he laughed often. He was probably close to her own age, maybe 25 or 26, and he was looking at her with an expression of friendly concern. "Wagon coming," he said, nodding toward the street where indeed a wagon was approaching at a good pace. "Would have hated to see you get run down your first day in town." "How do you know it is my first day?" Josephine asked, though she knew the answer. Everyone would know. That was the nature of small towns. His smile widened, transforming his face from handsome to something that made her stomach do an uncomfortable flip. "Because I would have noticed you before now if you had been here longer. I am Grant Emerson." He tipped his hat politely. "Welcome to Kingman, Josephine Dalton." She knew she should thank him and move on, maintain the distance she needed to keep from everyone, but something about his open, friendly manner made her want to linger. "Do you live here?" "Have a ranch about 5 miles out. I come into town for supplies and to remind myself why I prefer the company of cattle to most people." His eyes sparkled with humor. "Present company accepted, of course. What brings you to Kingman, Miss Dalton?" There was that question again. "Looking for a fresh start." Something flickered in his expression, a understanding that suggested he knew about running from things. "Well, Kingman is a good place for that. Small enough that folks look out for each other, but everyone here has a past they would rather not discuss, so no one asks too many questions." "That sounds perfect," Josephine said honestly. Grant studied her for a moment, his expression turning serious. "You have a place to stay, because if you need help finding something safe, I know some good people who take in boarders." The genuine concern in his voice touched something in her chest that she had thought Pemberton, and his threats had frozen solid. "I have a room at the hotel for tonight. I start work at the restaurant tomorrow, so I should be able to afford something more permanent soon." Sadie's place. She is good people. Works her help hard but treats them fair. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something, then said, "Look, I know we just met and you have no reason to trust me, but if you need anything, anything at all, you can ask for me. Anyone in town can tell you where to find me, and I give you my word as a gentleman that the offer comes with no strings attached." Josephine wanted to laugh at the idea of a cowboy calling himself a gentleman, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped her. "Why would you offer that to a complete stranger?" "Because you look like someone who has been running from something, and I know what that feels like. I came out here 7 years ago with nothing but a horse and a lot of anger at the world. This town gave me a chance to become someone better than I was. I figure it is only right to pass that along." He touched the brim of his hat again. "I should let you get on with your evening, but think about what I said, all right?" Before she could respond, he had stepped past her and was walking down the street, his long strides carrying him quickly away. Josephine stood there watching him go, her mind whirling with confusion. She had expected many things when she came west, but not kindness from a stranger who asked for nothing in return. She spent the rest of the evening in her room, eating the bread and cheese she had bought from the general store and watching the sun set over the desert landscape. The colors were spectacular, unlike anything she had ever seen in Philadelphia, and for the first time since her father had died, she felt something other than fear and grief. It was not quite hope, not yet, but it was close. The next morning, Josephine was at Sadie's restaurant at 6 o'clock sharp, and within an hour, she understood why the work paid so well. The place was packed from the moment it opened, with miners, ranchers, and townspeople all wanting breakfast before starting their days. Josephine had never worked so hard in her life, carrying plates, refilling coffee, clearing tables, and somehow managing to keep everyone's orders straight in her head. By noon, when the breakfast rush finally ended and the lunch crowd had not yet arrived, she was exhausted but also exhilarated. Sadie watched her clean tables with an approving expression. "You are a hard worker, not afraid to sweat. I like that." Sadie handed her a plate of food. "Sit, eat. You have earned it." Josephine sat gratefully, her feet aching in her boots. The food was simple but delicious. Eggs and potatoes and bacon cooked perfectly. "I saw Grant Emerson talking to you yesterday," Sadie said casually, too casually. "That man does not talk to strangers without good reason. You must have made an impression." "He warned me about a wagon," Josephine said, keeping her tone neutral. "He seemed nice," Sadie laughed. "Nice? Yes, I suppose that is one word for Grant Emerson. That man has half the unmarried women in 3 counties trying to catch his eye, and he does not seem to notice any of them. Works his ranch from sunup to sundown, comes to town once a week for supplies, and goes back out again. Been that way for years." "Why are you telling me this?" Josephine asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. "Because you look like you are planning to run again soon, and I want you to know that Kingman has more to offer than you might think." Sadie's expression was knowing. "I have been running my restaurant for 15 years. I have seen a lot of people come through this town. Most of them are running from something. The ones who stay are the ones who find a reason to stop running. That is all I am saying." Josephine wanted to argue, to say that she was not looking for a reason to stay, that one night was all she had planned, but the words would not come. The truth was, the thought of getting back on a stagecoach and traveling to yet another, unknown town made her feel bone deep weary in a way that had nothing to do with the morning's work. The lunch crowd kept her too busy to think about it, and then the dinner crowd came, and by the time the restaurant closed at 8 o'clock, Josephine could barely stand. Sadie pressed $2 into her hand, more than the agreed-upon wage. "For doing good work. Come back tomorrow." "Yes," Josephine heard herself say. "I will be here." She walked back to the hotel in the twilight, the air finally beginning to cool after the day's heat. Martha was at the desk and looked up with a smile. "Sadie sent word that you did well. I have a room available long-term if you want it. $12 a month includes breakfast. That is the best rate you will find in Kingman." $12. Josephine did the math quickly. If she kept making $2 a day at the restaurant, she could afford it with enough left over to start saving. But that meant committing to staying in Kingman for at least a month, maybe longer. "Can I let you know tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course. But I should tell you I have someone else interested, and I will need to give them an answer by tomorrow evening." Josephine nodded and climbed the stairs to her room, her mind churning. Everything practical said she should take the room, stay in Kingman at least long enough to build up some savings. But everything cautious said she should keep moving, not give Pemberton a chance to track her down. She was standing at the window, watching the stars come out over the desert, when she heard the sound of a guitar drifting up from somewhere below. The music was beautiful, a slow melody that seemed to capture the loneliness and hope of the frontier in equal measure. Without thinking about it, she went back downstairs and followed the sound to the alley beside the hotel. Grant Emerson was sitting on a barrel, his back against the wall, playing a battered guitar with surprising skill. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and stopped playing. "Miss Dalton." "Could not sleep. I heard the music. It is beautiful." He smiled, that transformation of his face that did dangerous things to her resolve to keep everyone at a distance. "My mother taught me. Said every man should know how to make something beautiful to balance out all the hard and ugly things in the world." She sounds wise. She was. The past tense hung in the air between them. "She died when I was 16. That is part of what sent me west, looking for something I could not name." Josephine found herself sitting down on another barrel, drawn by the openness in his voice. "Did you find it?" "Eventually. Turned out what I was looking for was a place where I could work hard enough to be too tired to think about all the things I had lost." He strummed a few chords absently. "What are you running from, Josephine Dalton?" She should have bristled at the presumption, should have told him it was none of his business. But there was something about the darkness and the music and the way he had used her first name like they were already friends that made her want to tell the truth. "A man who thinks he owns me because my father owed him money. He wanted me to marry him to settle the debt. I sold everything and left instead." Grant's expression darkened. "How old is this man?" 48. "And you are what, 22? 23. At her nod, he said something under his breath that she was probably glad she did not quite catch. "So you are running because you are afraid he will come after you." "I know he will come after me. Gerald Pemberton does not like losing things he considers his property." She wrapped her arms around herself despite the warm night air. "I plan to keep moving, never stay anywhere long enough for him to track me down. Or you could stay and build a life here. Let people help protect you if he does show up." Grant set the guitar aside and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I know it is easier said than done. I know trust is hard when someone has hurt you, but running forever is no kind of life, Josephine. I have only been here one night. You do not know anything about me. I know you are brave enough to travel across the country alone. I know you work hard and do not complain. I know you have kind eyes and a smile that you do not let out nearly enough." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "I am not trying to court you or anything like that. I am just saying, as one person who ran away to another, Sometimes the best way to win is to stop running and stand your ground. Even if I wanted to stay, I have no money, no family, nothing to stand my ground with. You have yourself, and that is more than a lot of people have. And you would have friends if you let yourself. He stood and picked up his guitar. Think about it. That is all I ask. One more day. Stay one more day and see how you feel. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her sitting in the alley with his words echoing in her mind. One more day. What could it hurt to stay one more day? She went back to her room and lay awake most of the night, thinking about Grant's words, about the way he had looked at her with such certainty that she could make a life here. By the time the sun rose, she had made a decision. When she went downstairs for breakfast, she found Martha in the dining room and said, "I will take the room, the long-term one." Martha's face lit up with a smile. "Wonderful. I will get the papers drawn up today. You can move your things to the new room this evening. It is bigger, has a nicer view." Josephine felt a weight lift from her chest that she had not fully realized she was carrying. She was staying. At least for now, she was staying. She told Sadie when she arrived at the restaurant, and the older woman nodded with satisfaction. "Good. I hate training people just to have them leave. Now I can teach you the books like you wanted." The day passed in the same blur of activity as the day before, but Josephine found herself noticing things she had been too nervous to see yesterday. The way the regular customers joked with each other. The camaraderie among the people who lived in Kingman. The sense that despite being in the middle of the desert, far from any major city, there was a real community here. Grant came in for lunch, taking a seat at the counter and nodding to Josephine when she brought him coffee. "Heard you took a room at Martha's place," he said. "Does that mean you are staying?" "For now," she said, not ready to commit to more than that. "For now is good. That is a start." He studied her over his coffee cup. "You should come out to the ranch sometime. See what I do when I am not in town charming waitresses." "I thought you said you were not trying to court me." "I am not. I am trying to be your friend. There is a difference." But the smile he gave her suggested the line between the two might not be as clear as he claimed. She wanted to say no, to maintain the boundaries she had set for herself, but she heard herself saying, "Maybe. If I have a day off." "Sadie gives everyone Sunday off. I could come get you this Sunday, show you around, bring you back before dark. Completely proper." Josephine knew she should refuse. She had been in Kingman for less than 2 full days. She barely knew this man, but there was something about Grant Emerson that made her want to take risks she would normally never consider. "All right. This Sunday." His smile was bright enough to rival the Arizona sun. "I will pick you up at 8. Wear boots if you have them. Ranch life is not kind to fancy shoes." He left shortly after, but Josephine found herself thinking about him for the rest of the day. There was a warmth in her chest that felt dangerously like happiness, and she tried to tamp it down. She could not afford to get attached to anyone or anything. She was staying in Kingman for practical reasons, nothing more. But when Sunday came and Grant arrived at Martha's in a wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses, she was waiting at the door with a smile she could not quite hide. He helped her up onto the wagon seat with a hand that was calloused from hard work but gentle, and they set off toward his ranch. The ride took about half an hour, through desert landscape that was harsh and beautiful in equal measure. Grant pointed out landmarks, told her stories about the area, and asked her about her life in Philadelphia. She found herself relaxing more than she had in months, lulled by his easy manner and genuine interest. The ranch, when they arrived, was modest but well kept. A sturdy house, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and chickens scratched in the yard. "It is not much, but it is mine," Grant said, a note of pride in his voice. "Every board, every nail, I put it here with my own hands." "It is wonderful," Josephine said honestly. There was something about seeing what he had built, the physical proof of his hard work, that made her respect him even more. He showed her around, introducing her to his 2 horses, a cow he kept for milk, and an assortment of chickens who seemed to have distinct personalities if his stories about them were to be believed. He was easy to talk to, quick to laugh, and had a way of making even the most mundane tasks seem interesting. They had lunch under a cottonwood tree near the house, simple fare of bread and cheese and apples that somehow tasted better in the open air. Grant told her about his plans to expand the ranch, buy more cattle, maybe build a bigger house someday. "You ever think about having a family?" Josephine asked, then immediately wished she had not. It was too personal, too forward, but Grant did not seem bothered by the question. "Sure. Someday, when I meet the right woman, someone who does not mind the isolation, who can handle the hard work, someone who wants to build something lasting." He looked at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "What about you? You ever think about marriage, family?" "I did before. But after my father died and Pemberton showed his true colors, I am not sure anymore. The idea of belonging to someone, of giving up control of my own life, it terrifies me." "Marriage should not be about one person belonging to another," Grant said quietly. "It should be a partnership. 2 people choosing to build a life together because it is better than what they could build apart." "Is that what your parents had?" "It is. They were best friends as well as husband and wife. When my mother died, it broke something in my father. He followed her within a year." He plucked a blade of grass and twirled it between his fingers. "I always swore that if I ever married, it would be like that. All in, no halfway." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Josephine realized with a start that she felt safe here, safer than she had felt in a long time. It was a dangerous feeling, one that could lead to her letting her guard down, but for this moment, she let herself enjoy it. The afternoon passed too quickly, and before she knew it, Grant was helping her back into the wagon for the ride back to town. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Josephine felt a pang of regret that the day was ending. "Thank you for today," she said as they pulled up in front of Martha's. "I enjoyed it." "Me too." Grant's expression was serious. "Can I see you again? Not just passing in the restaurant, but like this. Spend time together." "I thought you said you were not trying to court me." "I said that when I thought you would be leaving after one night, but you stayed, and now I am saying I would very much like to court you if you are willing." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I know you are not looking for this. I know you have reasons to keep people at a distance, but I think there is something here between us, something worth exploring." Josephine's mind raced. Everything logical said she should refuse, keep her distance, protect herself. But her heart, which had been frozen for so long, was beginning to thaw, and it wanted her to say yes. "I am not ready for anything serious," she said finally. "I am still figuring out my life, still afraid Pemberton might find me. I cannot promise you anything." "I am not asking for promises. I am just asking for a chance. Let me take you to dinner, to church socials, on rides like today. Let us see where this goes." His eyes were so earnest, so full of hope, that she could not bring herself to disappoint him. "All right, but slowly. We take this slowly." His smile lit up his whole face. "Slowly. I can do slowly." He helped her down from the wagon and waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Josephine went up to her room feeling like she was floating, her mind full of the way he had looked at her, the gentleness of his touch, the warmth in his voice. Martha caught her at breakfast the next morning with a knowing smile. "Grant Emerson does not take just anyone out to his ranch. That boy is smitten." "We are just getting to know each other," Josephine protested, but she could feel the heat in her cheeks. Hum. That is how it starts. Next thing you know, you will be planning a wedding." Martha winked. "Mark my words, that man is going to marry you." Josephine tried to dismiss the idea, but it lodged in her mind and would not leave. Marriage. To Grant. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it filled her with a longing she had not expected. Over the next few weeks, Grant made good on his promise to court her properly. He came to town twice a week now instead of once, always finding time to stop by the restaurant for a meal and conversation. He took her to church on Sundays, where she met more of the townspeople and began to feel like she was becoming part of the community. He brought her flowers from his ranch, wild desert blooms that were beautiful in their simplicity. He was patient with her fears, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. When she startled at sudden sounds or seemed lost in dark thoughts, he would take her hand and talk to her about everyday things until the panic passed. He made her laugh with stories about his misadventures learning to be a rancher. He listened when she talked about her father, her childhood, her dreams. Josephine found herself falling for him slowly but inexorably, like water wearing away stone. She loved the way he tipped his hat to elderly ladies on the street. She loved his work ethic and his kindness to animals. She loved the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. 2 months after her arrival in Kingman, Grant took her back out to the ranch for another Sunday visit. They spent the morning riding, something Josephine had never done much of but was learning under Grant's patient instruction. After lunch, they sat on the porch of his house, watching the clouds drift across the endless blue sky. "I have been thinking," Grant said slowly, "about asking you something important, but I want to make sure you are ready to hear it." Josephine's heart started to pound. What kind of question? The kind that might change both our lives. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Josephine, these past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. I wake up excited to see you. I go to sleep thinking about you. You have made me believe in the possibility of having the kind of partnership my parents had, the kind I always dreamed about." "Grant, let me finish." His grip on her hands tightened. "I know you are still afraid. I know you worry about Pemberton finding you, but I want you to know that if he does, he will have to go through me to get to you. I will protect you with everything I have." "You barely know me," Josephine whispered, though her heart was soaring. "I know enough. I know you are brave and kind and funny. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know that when you smile, really smile, it feels like the sun coming out after a storm." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I am not asking you to marry me right now. I know you need more time, but I am asking you to think about a future with me. A real future. Here on this ranch, building a life together." Tears pricked Josephine's eyes. "I am afraid I will disappoint you. I am afraid I am too broken from everything that happened." "You are not broken. You are healing. And I want to be part of that healing if you will let me." He reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "I love you, Josephine Dalton. I have loved you since the day I caught your arm before you walked into that wagon. I will wait as long as you need, but I had to tell you." "I love you too," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I have been trying not to, trying to keep my distance, but I cannot help it. You have been so patient, so kind, so everything I never knew I needed." Grant's smile was radiant. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other, not needing words. "I need to tell you something," Josephine said eventually, pulling back to look at him. "About Pemberton, about why I am really so afraid. You do not have to, I do. If we are going to have a future, you need to know everything." She took a deep breath. "Pemberton is not just a businessman. He has connections to some dangerous people. When I refused to marry him, he told me that if I ran, he would find me and he would make sure I regretted it. He said no one would help me because everyone owed him favors. Grant's jaw tightened. Did he hurt you? He tried to. The night before I left, he came to the house. He said he was tired of waiting for me to agree that he would just take what was owed to him. I fought him off with a fireplace poker and left that same night. The memory still made her feel sick. I am terrified that one day he will show up here and I will have put everyone I care about in danger. Listen to me. Grant cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. If that man shows up here, he will find that Kingman takes care of its own. You are not alone anymore, Josephine. You have me, you have Sadie and Martha, you have this whole town. We will not let him hurt you. You cannot promise that. Yes, I can, and I do. His expression was fierce. I love you. That means I will stand between you and anything that tries to harm you. That is not negotiable. Josephine felt something unlock in her chest, a tightness she had been carrying since her father died. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could stop running, that she could build a life here with this man who loved her so completely. Ask me, she said. Ask you what? What you were thinking about asking me. I am ready to hear it. Grant's eyes widened. Josephine, are you sure? Because once I ask, I am not going to be able to take it back. I am sure. Ask me. He stood, pulling her to her feet, and then dropped to one knee right there on the porch. Josephine Dalton, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend for the rest of our lives? Will you build this ranch and this life with me? Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face now. Yes, I will marry you. Grant surged to his feet and kissed her, a kiss that was full of promise and hope and a future she had never let herself imagine. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I do not have a ring yet. I will get you one, I promise. I do not need a ring. I just need you. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, talking about when they would get married, what they would do with the ranch, what kind of life they wanted to build. Josephine felt lighter than she had in years, like she could finally breathe fully. When Grant brought her back to town that evening, he walked her to the door of the boarding house and kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best way. I will be back on Wednesday, he promised, and we will start telling people. I want everyone to know you are going to be my wife. Josephine went to bed that night and slept better than she had since before her father died. She dreamed of a house in the desert, of children's laughter, of growing old beside a man who loved her truly and completely. The next morning, she told Sadie, who let out a whoop of joy that startled everyone in the restaurant. I knew it. I told you Grant Emerson was going to marry you. Sadie pulled her into a hug. That man has been walking around with stars in his eyes for weeks. I am so happy for you both. Martha's reaction was similar, and by the end of the day, it seemed like everyone in Kingman had heard the news. People Josephine barely knew stopped her on the street to offer congratulations. The general store owner gave her a discount on supplies, saying it was an engagement present. The blacksmith's wife invited her to dinner to discuss wedding plans. Josephine was overwhelmed by the warmth of the community's response. These people, who had been strangers just 2 months ago, were embracing her as one of their own. It made her decision to stay feel more right than anything she had ever done. Grant came to town on Wednesday as promised, a beautiful ring with a small diamond that he slipped onto her finger with shaking hands. It was my mother's, he said. My father gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to the woman I loved. I think he would have liked you. Josephine looked at the ring, simple but beautiful, and felt the weight of the commitment it represented. She was no longer running. She was staying, building, planting roots in this desert town with this incredible man. They decided to marry in a month, which gave them time to make preparations but did not feel so far away that they would lose their nerve. Josephine continued working at the restaurant, saving every penny she could. Grant started making improvements to the ranch house, adding a room, fixing up the kitchen, making it ready for a wife. Everything seemed perfect, and Josephine let herself believe that maybe her nightmare was over. Maybe Pemberton had given up, or maybe he had never really meant his threats. Maybe she could have this happiness without looking over her shoulder. 3 weeks before the wedding, Grant came into town on a Tuesday, which was unusual. The moment Josephine saw his face, she knew something was wrong. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Privately." They went out to the alley behind the restaurant where they had stood that first night when he had played his guitar and convinced her to stay one more day. "A man came to the ranch this morning," Grant said without preamble. "Asked a lot of questions about you. Where you came from, how long you had been here, whether you had any family around." Josephine felt the blood drain from her face. What did he look like? Tall, thin, gray hair, expensive clothes. He did not give a name, but he said he was looking for a young woman who might have come this way a few months ago. "That sounds like Pemberton's associate, a man named Harrison. He does his dirty work." Josephine wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm day. "He is here. Pemberton knows where I am." "Hey, look at me." Grant took her shoulders gently. "Nothing has changed. I told this Harrison fellow that I did not know anyone matching his description. He has no proof you are here. He will find proof. He will ask around town and someone will talk. Everyone knows about us, about the wedding." She could feel panic rising in her chest. "I should leave. If I leave now, he will follow me and you will be safe." "Absolutely not. You are not running again." Grant's voice was firm. "We are going to handle this together. We are going to go to the sheriff, tell him what is happening, and make sure you are protected. The sheriff cannot help if Pemberton has connections. Maybe not back east, but this is Kingman. Out here, we make our own justice." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Trust me, Josephine, please. Trust that I can keep you safe." She wanted to. She wanted so badly to believe that love could be enough, that Grant's determination could protect her from a man like Pemberton. But she had seen what Pemberton was capable of, had felt the threat in his words. "What if something happens to you because of me?" she whispered into his chest. "I could not bear it. Nothing is going to happen to me, and nothing is going to happen to you." He pulled back to look at her. "We are getting married in 3 weeks, remember? I am not letting anything stop that." They went to see Sheriff Tom Brennan, a gruff man in his 50s who listened to Josephine's story with a deepening frown. "So this Pemberton thinks he has some claim on you because of your father's debt. He wanted me to marry him to settle it. I refused and left. And you think he has sent someone to bring you back? I know he has. Harrison would not be here otherwise." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, considering. "Well, the law is pretty clear on this. You are an adult woman, not property. You have the right to live where you want and marry who you want. If this Pemberton or his associate tries to force you to do anything against your will, that is kidnapping, and I will arrest them. What if they try to hurt Grant, or the people who have helped me? Then I will arrest them for that too." Sheriff Brennan's expression was hard. "Miss Dalton, I have been sheriff of Kingman for 10 years. I have dealt with claim jumpers, cattle rustlers, and men who thought they could buy their way out of trouble. I do not take kindly to outsiders coming into my town and threatening my people. You are one of us now, and we take care of our own." His words echoed what Grant had told her, and Josephine felt some of her panic easing. She was not alone. She had people who would stand with her. "What should we do?" Grant asked. "Keep to your normal routines, but be careful. If you see this Harrison fellow or anyone suspicious, let me know immediately. I will spread the word to keep an eye out." And if Pemberton himself shows up, well, I will make sure he understands how we do things out west." They thanked the sheriff and left. Grant insisted on walking Josephine back to the boarding house and staying until she was safely inside. "I am going to stay in town for a few days," he said. "I do not like the idea of you being here without someone watching over you. You cannot put your whole life on hold because of me. You are my life now. The ranch can wait." He kissed her forehead. "Try to get some rest. I will be right here if you need anything." The next few days were tense. Josephine went to work but found herself jumping at shadows, watching every stranger who came into the restaurant. Grant stayed in town as promised, sleeping in a room at the boarding house and making sure Josephine was never alone. Then, 5 days after Harrison had appeared at Grant's ranch, Pemberton himself arrived in Kingman. Josephine was serving lunch when the restaurant door opened and he walked in, looking exactly as she remembered him. Tall, gray-haired, expensively dressed and wearing an expression that suggested he owned everything and everyone around him. His eyes locked onto her immediately, and a cold smile spread across his face. "There you are, Josephine. I have been looking everywhere for you." The plate in Josephine's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Every head in the restaurant turned and Sadie came out from the kitchen, her expression darkening when she saw Pemberton. "Who are you?" Sadie demanded. "Gerald Pemberton. I am here to collect what belongs to me." He took a step toward Josephine, who backed away instinctively. "I do not belong to you," she said, proud that her voice only shook slightly. "I never did. Your father owed me $10,000. We had an agreement that you would marry me to settle that debt. My father is dead and I am not responsible for his debts, and I certainly am not something that can be traded to settle them." Josephine lifted her chin, drawing on every bit of courage she possessed. "You need to leave. I am not leaving without you." Pemberton's voice turned cold. "You can come willingly, or I can make you come. But either way, you are returning to Philadelphia with me." "The lady told you to leave." Grant's voice came from the doorway, and Josephine felt a wave of relief so strong it nearly buckled her knees. He must have been watching the restaurant, waiting for Pemberton to show up. Pemberton turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in Grant. "And who are you?" "Grant Emerson, Josephine's fiancé." Grant moved to stand beside Josephine, his presence solid and reassuring. "And I am only going to say this once. Get out of this town and do not come back." Pemberton laughed, a harsh sound. "You think you can stop me? I have lawyers, connections, resources you could not begin to imagine. That woman is coming with me, and there is nothing a dusty cowboy can do about it." "Actually, there is quite a bit I can do." Sheriff Brennan stepped into the restaurant, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "For starters, I can arrest you for threatening a citizen of Kingman. Then I can hold you in my jail while I send telegrams to Philadelphia, checking into these supposed debts and agreements." Pemberton's expression turned ugly. "You do not want to cross me, Sheriff. I have friends in high places. And I have jurisdiction in this place. Your friends cannot help you here." Brennan moved closer, his stance making it clear he was not going to back down. "Now you have 2 choices. You can leave Kingman peacefully and never come back, or you can spend the next several weeks in a cell that is not nearly as comfortable as whatever hotel you are used to. Your choice." For a long moment, Pemberton just stared at the sheriff, clearly trying to decide if he was serious. Then his gaze moved to Josephine, and the hatred in his eyes made her shudder. "This is not over," he said softly. "I will find a way to make you pay for this humiliation." "I think it is over," Grant said, his voice calm but with an edge of steel underneath. "Because if you or anyone working for you comes near Josephine again, it will be the last mistake you ever make. That is not a threat. It is a promise." Pemberton looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Grant's expression made him reconsider. He turned on his heel and stalked out of the restaurant, slamming the door behind him. The silence he left behind was deafening. Then Sadie started clapping, and soon the whole restaurant erupted in applause. Josephine found herself surrounded by people offering support, telling her she was brave, assuring her that Pemberton would not bother her again. Grant pulled her aside, his hands framing her face as he searched her eyes. "Are you all right?" "I think so. I am shaking, but I am all right." She covered his hands with hers. "Thank you for standing up for me, for being here. Always, I will always be here." He kissed her gently, not caring that half the town was watching. "He is gone, Josephine. You are free." Sheriff Brennan came over, nodding to them both. "I am going to make sure Pemberton gets on the next stage out of town and does not come back. I will also send some telegrams, see what I can find out about his business dealings. Men like that usually have enemies who would be happy to share information." "Thank you, Sheriff," Josephine said. "For everything. Just doing my job. Besides, I already told you you are one of us now." He tipped his hat and left, presumably to follow Pemberton and ensure he actually left town. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Josephine tried to work, but Sadie finally sent her home, telling her to take the rest of the day to recover. Grant walked her back to the boarding house and sat with her in the small parlor, holding her hand and talking about nothing important until she stopped shaking. "I cannot believe it is over," she said finally. "I spent so long being afraid, and now he is just gone. He never should have had that kind of power over you in the first place. But yes, it is over. You can stop looking over your shoulder now. Because of you, because of this town." Josephine squeezed his hand. "I would still be running if you had not convinced me to stay." "One more day," Grant said with a smile. "That was all I asked for initially, just one more day. And here we are, 3 months later, planning a wedding. Best decision I ever made, convincing you to stay." He brought her hand to his lips. "The best decision you ever made too, I hope. Without question." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling peace settle over her for the first time since her father's death. "I love you, Grant Emerson." "I love you too, Josephine Dalton." Soon to be Josephine Emerson. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on a beautiful October morning when the worst of the summer heat had passed, and the desert air was almost pleasant. Josephine wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make, and Grant wore his best suit, looking so handsome that Josephine's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar of the small church. The entire town turned out for the ceremony. Sadie cried through the whole thing. Martha beamed like a proud mother. Sheriff Brennan stood in the back, keeping watch even though Pemberton had not been seen or heard from since that day in the restaurant. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Grant kissed her, the church erupted in cheers. Josephine felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The reception was held at the restaurant, with Sadie providing a feast and the whole town bringing dishes to share. There was music and dancing and more laughter than Josephine had ever experienced in one day. She danced with Grant, with Sheriff Brennan, with the blacksmith and the general store owner and every other man who asked. But mostly she stayed close to her husband, still getting used to that word, still marveling at the fact that this was her life now. As the sun began to set and the party showed no signs of ending, Grant leaned down to whisper in her ear. "What do you say we slip away to our new home, Mrs. Emerson?" Josephine smiled up at him. "I say that sounds perfect." They said their goodbyes and left amid more cheers and well wishes, climbing into Grant's wagon for the ride out to the ranch. The ride was quiet, both of them content to sit close together and watch the stars come out over the desert. The ranch house, when they arrived, was lit up with lanterns that Grant must have arranged earlier. He helped Josephine down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up in his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed, "carrying my bride over the threshold. It is tradition." He carried her up the steps and into the house, setting her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home, Josephine." She looked around at the home he had worked so hard to prepare for her. New curtains hung in the windows. A rocking chair sat by the fireplace. There were flowers on the table and a quilt on the bed visible through the bedroom door. "It is perfect," she said, tears blurring her vision. "You are perfect." "I am far from perfect, but I will spend every day trying to be the husband you deserve." He pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it was different from all the careful, respectful kisses they had shared during their courtship. This kiss was full of promise and passion, and the knowledge that they had all the time in the world. They spent their wedding night wrapped in each other's arms, learning the contours of this new intimacy, whispering promises and dreams into the darkness. Josephine had never felt so safe, so loved, so completely at home. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Josephine settled into life as a rancher's wife, learning to cook on the wood stove, to tend the garden, to help with the livestock when Grant needed an extra pair of hands. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia, but it was satisfying in a way her old life had never been. She continued to work at the restaurant twice a week, partly for the extra money but mostly because she enjoyed it and Sadie had become like family. Grant never complained about her working, saying he had married a partner, not a servant. They were happy in a way that seemed almost too good to be true. They talked for hours in the evenings, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set. They laughed together, worked together, planned their future together. Grant taught Josephine to ride properly, and she taught him to appreciate poetry. They were building the kind of partnership Grant had described, where each made the other better. 6 months after their wedding, Josephine realized she was pregnant. She told Grant one evening over dinner, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming him. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be." "I think the baby will come in the fall." Grant let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "We are having a baby. Josephine, we are going to be parents." His joy was infectious, and Josephine found herself laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it. You have given me everything I ever dreamed of and more." He set her down carefully, his hands going to her still flat stomach. "A baby, our baby." They told Martha and Sadie the next week, and once again, the news spread through Kingman like wildfire. People stopped Josephine on the street to offer congratulations and advice. The blacksmith's wife started knitting baby clothes. The general store owner ordered a cradle from back east as a gift. Josephine was overwhelmed by the kindness of the community that had taken her in. These people, who had been strangers less than a year ago, were now her family in every way that mattered. The pregnancy was not easy. The heat of the Arizona summer made her sick, and there were days when she could barely get out of bed. But Grant was endlessly patient, taking over her chores without complaint, bringing her cool water and whatever food she could stomach, sitting with her and reading aloud when she was too miserable to do anything else. "I am sorry I am so useless," she said one particularly bad day. "You are growing our child. That is the opposite of useless." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Besides, you took care of me when I had that fever in the spring. This is just returning the favor. That was different. You were actually sick. And you are doing one of the hardest things a body can do. Give yourself some credit, love." As the summer wore on and her belly grew round, Josephine found herself thinking about the future more than the past. She thought about what kind of mother she wanted to be, what values she wanted to pass on to their child. She thought about watching her son or daughter grow up in this harsh but beautiful place, learning to be strong and kind like their father. In September, 2 weeks before the baby was due, Sheriff Brennan came out to the ranch with news. He dismounted from his horse and accepted the water Josephine offered before getting to the point. "Thought you should know, Gerald Pemberton is dead. Died 3 months ago in Philadelphia. Heart attack, apparently." Josephine felt nothing at the news, no satisfaction or grief, just a sense of relief that the shadow that had hung over her life for so long was finally, truly gone. "Thank you for telling me. There is more." Turns out Pemberton was under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. He had bilked a lot of people out of money, including your father. The debts he claimed were mostly fabricated. Brennan's expression was grim. "Your father did not owe him nearly as much as he claimed. The whole thing about you marrying him to settle the debt was a lie to manipulate you." Josephine sat down heavily, one hand on her swollen belly. All that running, all that fear, had been based on a lie. Her father had not left her with an impossible debt. Pemberton had simply wanted to own her and had used her grief and confusion to try to make it happen. "Are you all right?" Grant asked, crouching beside her chair and taking her hand. "I think so. It is just a lot to take in." She looked at Sheriff Brennan. "Is there anything else?" The investigators found records of other women Pemberton tried to coerce into marriage the same way. "You were not the first, though you were the only one who managed to get away." He shook his head. "You were brave, Miss Emerson. Running the way you did probably saved your life." After the sheriff left, Josephine and Grant sat together on the porch processing the news. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "I wasted so much time being afraid of a lie," Josephine said finally. "You were not wasting time. You were surviving. And you survived in a way that brought you here to me, to this life. I cannot regret anything that led to us being together." Grant pressed a kiss to her temple. "The past is done. Now we just have the future to look forward to." The baby came 2 weeks later on a warm October evening. The birth was long and difficult, with Martha and Sadie both present to help. Grant paced outside, occasionally coming in to check on Josephine, his face tight with worry. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a lusty cry and a head full of dark hair, Grant was at Josephine's side immediately. He looked at his son with an expression of such wonder and love that Josephine felt tears streaming down her face. "He is perfect," Grant whispered. "You are amazing. You did so well." They named him Thomas, after Grant's father, and little Tommy became the center of their world. Grant was a devoted father, getting up in the middle of the night to walk with Tommy when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, talking to his son in a soft, tender voice that made Josephine fall even more in love with her husband. The months after Tommy's birth were exhausting but joyful. Josephine learned to function on very little sleep, to nurse while eating her own meals, to do chores one-handed while holding the baby. Grant hired a young man from town to help with the ranch work so he could spend more time with his family. They watched Tommy grow, celebrated his first smile, his first tooth, his first word, which was "da," and made Grant grin for days. Josephine took 1,000 mental pictures of moments she wanted to remember forever. Grant teaching Tommy to clap his hands, Tommy falling asleep on his father's chest, the three of them sitting together on the porch watching the sunset. When Tommy was a year old, Josephine realized she was pregnant again. This time, she was more prepared for what was coming, and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter, Alice was born on a snowy January morning, coming into the world quickly and with far less fuss than her brother had made. Grant was just as besotted with Alice as he had been with Tommy. He called her his little princess, and could often be found with her tucked into one arm while he did chores with the other. Tommy, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything, though his help was usually more hindrance. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered, growing from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the area. Grant's hard work and Josephine's skill with numbers and planning made them a formidable team. They added onto the house, built new outbuildings, bought more cattle. Josephine occasionally worked at the restaurant, bringing the children with her. Sadie doted on Tommy and Alice, and they grew up as comfortable in the restaurant as they were on the ranch. The whole town watched them grow, offering advice and help, and the kind of community support that Josephine had never experienced growing up in Philadelphia. The years passed, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. Tommy starting school, Alice learning to ride, the arrival of a third child, another boy they named Henry, the expansion of the ranch to include sheep as well as cattle, Grant being elected to the town council, Josephine starting a lending library out of their home for families who could not afford books. Through it all, Josephine and Grant's love for each other only deepened. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, now with children playing at their feet. They still talked for hours, sharing their thoughts and dreams. They still looked at each other across the dinner table and marveled at the life they had built together. One evening when Tommy was 10, Alice was 8, and Henry was 5, Josephine found an old newspaper while cleaning out a trunk. It was from Philadelphia, dated shortly after she had left, with a small article about Gerald Pemberton's business dealings being called into question. She showed it to Grant, who read it and then set it aside. "Do you ever regret leaving Philadelphia? Wonder what your life would have been like if you had stayed?" "Never," Josephine said without hesitation. "That life was killing me slowly. This life with you, with our children, this is what I was always meant for. I just did not know it until I met you." "I asked you to stay for one more day," Grant said, pulling her close, "and you gave me forever." "Best decision I ever made," Josephine said, echoing words from years ago. Staying for one more day, and then another, and another, until days became a lifetime. They stood there watching their children play in the yard, the desert stretching out around them in all directions, beautiful and harsh and home. Josephine thought about that frightened girl who had jumped off the stagecoach 3 years ago, certain she would only stay one night. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the cowboy with the kind eyes and warm laugh would not just convince her to stay one more day, but would give her reasons to stay forever. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. When Tommy turned 16, he started talking about wanting to expand the ranch even further, to try new techniques he had read about in agricultural journals. Grant listened carefully to his son's ideas, treating him like an equal partner rather than a child, and together they implemented changes that increased their profits significantly. Alice showed an aptitude for teaching and started helping the younger children in town with their lessons. Josephine watched her daughter with pride, seeing in her the kind of quiet strength and kindness that made the world better. Henry, the baby of the family, turned out to have a gift for working with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animal with patience and soft words. Josephine and Grant's hair began to show streaks of gray, and their hands bore the calluses and scars of decades of hard work. But they still held hands when they walked, still stole kisses when they thought the children were not looking, still looked at each other with the same love and devotion they had felt on their wedding day. On their 20th anniversary, Grant surprised Josephine by taking her back to the spot where they had first met, the street corner in Kingman where he had kept her from walking into a wagon's path. "I think about this moment all the time," he said, standing with her on that corner. "About how close I came to never meeting you. If I had been standing somewhere else, if you had gotten off the stagecoach a minute later, our whole lives would have been different. But we did meet. You saved me, and then you saved me again by convincing me to stay." Josephine leaned into his shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me that night in the alley, when you asked me to stay one more day? I said that running forever is no kind of life. You also said that sometimes the best way to win is to stop running and stand your ground." I have thought about those words so many times over the years. They changed everything for me. Grant turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face the way he had done so many times before. "You changed everything for me too. Before you, I was just existing, working hard to avoid thinking about all the things I had lost. You taught me how to live again, how to hope again, how to love." They kissed there on that street corner, not caring that they were surrounded by people going about their daily business. Some things were worth celebrating publicly, and a love like theirs was certainly one of them. The children grew up and made lives of their own. Tommy married a girl from a neighboring ranch and took over more and more of the daily operations, allowing Grant to slow down slightly in his old age. Alice became a teacher, marrying the new schoolmaster and filling her home with books and laughter. Henry started his own horse breeding program, developing a reputation for quality animals that brought buyers from all over the territory. Josephine and Grant became grandparents, delighting in spoiling their grandchildren and passing on stories of the old days. They told the children about how Grandma had come to Kingman, planning to stay only one night, and how Grandpa had convinced her to stay forever. The grandchildren loved that story, asking for it again and again. "Tell us about the wagon, Grandpa," they would beg. "Tell us about the guitar in the alley. Tell us about when Grandma stood up to the bad man." And Grant and Josephine would tell the stories, sometimes together, sometimes taking turns, always making sure the children understood the important lessons. That love takes courage, that community matters, that standing your ground is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. As they grew older, Grant and Josephine spent more time on their porch, watching the sunset over the desert they had learned to love. The ranch continued to prosper under Tommy's management, and they had the luxury of simply enjoying their remaining years together. "Do you think we will always have this?" Josephine asked one evening, her head resting on Grant's shoulder. She was in her 60s now, her hair completely silver, her face lined with age but still beautiful in Grant's eyes. "Have what?" Grant asked, though he knew what she meant. "This feeling. Like we are still newlyweds sometimes, still discovering each other." "I hope so. I cannot imagine ever getting tired of being with you." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You are my best friend, Josephine, my partner, my great love. That does not change just because we are getting old." "We are not getting old. We are becoming vintage," Josephine said with a laugh. "Like fine wine. Exactly like fine wine. Better with age." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play in the yard while their own children supervised. The ranch that had started as Grant's modest dream had become a legacy that would support their family for generations. The town of Kingman, once just a place Josephine had planned to pass through, had become deeply and truly home. No regrets. Grant asked, a question he had asked her many times over the years. "Not a single one," Josephine answered, as she always did. "You convinced me to stay for one more day, and I ended up staying for a lifetime. It was the best decision I ever made." "Second best," Grant corrected with a smile. The best decision was saying yes when I asked you to marry me. No, that was the best decision you made. The best decision I made was getting off that stagecoach in the first place. They could argue about it forever, and they often did, playfully debating which decision had been the most important. But the truth was, all of it mattered. Every choice, every moment, every day they had chosen each other had built into the life they now shared. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Grant and Josephine sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, living the life they had fought for. The girl who had wanted to leave after one night had found reasons to stay forever, and the cowboy who had convinced her to give him one more day had been given a lifetime of days with the woman he loved. Their story had started with fear and uncertainty, but it had become one of love, courage, and the kind of partnership that makes everything else possible. They had built a legacy not just in the ranch and the family, but in the example they set for everyone around them of what love could be when two people fully committed to each other and to building a life together. And as darkness fell and the stars came out over the desert, Grant and Josephine went inside their home, arms around each other, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. The stagecoach passenger who had planned to stay one night had found her forever home, and the cowboy who had asked for one more day had been given a lifetime of days to love her. It was, they both agreed, the best possible ending to a story that had started with a chance encounter on a dusty Arizona street so many years ago.